Hi everyone, welcome to today's video, and if you're new, welcome to my channel. In this video, I wanted to talk a little about some of the terminology that I use in other videos, things like when I talk about your soul or your energy or a dark soul, a narcissist, things like that. I wanted to kind of use this video to clarify what I mean by some of those things. And so the definition I'll provide is by no means the only way the word can be used, but the word is really just like more of a symbol for the actual phenomenon. So what I'm trying to do is assign the word to a phenomenon. So at the very least, you can sort of understand some of where I'm coming from as far as the things I describe. So let's just start with the soul. So when I talk about the soul, this is sort of like your energy generator. So this is, it's your being, it's who you are, it's what you carry with you after you die, and then from life to life with reincarnation. So it's just sort of like you. It's your essence, your life force. So all these things are what I'm talking about when I refer to your soul. So as far as your energy, so like I said, the soul is like an energy generator. So the energy would be what's generated from the soul. So people talk about like, oh, she has a lot of energy, or oh, wow, yeah, they just seem really low on energy, or like they're really lethargic. So all these kinds of things kind of refer to like your energy. So how how much output you're giving. So sometimes the energy can be drained by like physical, mental, emotional, spiritual sicknesses. So in that case, the person would seem to have a lower energy. And then as far as a soul piece, so we do have, an essential life force, which is our soul. And I believe that it is eternal. And, when people kind of talk about like you always change, but you always kind of stay the same, I kind of think of that as like your soul is always who you are on the deepest level, but your behaviors, your subconscious beliefs, and your thought patterns can absolutely change. You can even go from a light soul to a darker soul, and I'll define those in just a second. So the soul is just kind of just who you are, sort of eternally. So as far as a soul piece, so if a fragmentation occurs where there's a moment of trauma or some other kind of issue, like maybe, it's mostly just a moment of trauma where the soul would feel a need to separate from the rest of the being. And you can never lose your whole soul because you're always, a conscious being, but you can absolutely fragment. And the fragmentations or the soul pieces carry certain emotions, they carry certain memories, sensations. So without these soul pieces, you're still you, of course, but you may not be able to remember certain things, or you may not feel certain emotions or sensations. It's kind of hard to describe, but I think we've all had an experience where something happened and we were just kind of like never exactly the same after that, or maybe we can look back in childhood and feel like we're a different person now because we're just like less excited by things kind of seem less magical, that kind of thing. Would be like the soul pieces that are missing. That can also be caused by other things as well, like entity attachments. But I already have videos about that, about human and non-human ones. So I'll link those below if you're interested. You can also check that out. So I won't be talking about the entities in this video. So as far as staying on the subject of the soul, so as far as soul stealing, so what does that mean? So when someone is stealing your soul, they're not stealing the whole thing. They're just stealing pieces, usually pretty small pieces, but they can also steal several over a long period of time. And you will know because you will always feel drawn to them regardless of where you are in your life, because the soul is going to be drawn back to the person that has those pieces in order to try to, seek wholeness. So to steal a soul piece, what the person does is typically create a shock or a trauma or some kind of unbearable emotional pain or physical pain, and a piece of the soul will leave, sort of like dissociation, in order to survive that impact. So it's done to protect you, so that it's sort of better to just fragment than to let someone steal that piece. So sometimes that's why they'll just leave on their own. Another way that people can steal pieces of other souls is by psychically overpowering them. So it doesn't necessarily, the shock or trauma doesn't necessarily need to be physical. It can also be emotional, or just a sensation of, having like a secret enemy kind of thing. Or maybe the parent was like an enemy, but it didn't seem like they were an enemy, but they just sabotaged their child's success or their self-esteem, that kind of thing. Or someone can even look at you and be like, oh, like I really like their energy. I kind of want some of that for myself. So that can kind of be another aspect of soul stealing, but they can't actually, it's much more likely to happen from someone close to you, or if when you have weak boundaries, like as a child, because you just haven't, developed enough to understand how to protect yourself, or you just can't. So that's another way that people steal fragments. And then as far as fragmenting, when they're not being stolen and they're just leaving in that moment of shock or trauma. So they can leave, when they leave, they are still in that moment. So time, as we know, is sort of just like, it's sort of like an illusion, because the past and the future only exist as what's the word? They're not necessarily concrete. So, so what I'm trying to say is we always exist in the present. So when the soul piece fragments, it's still in the time of when that trauma happened. So it's still stuck in that moment in time. So you have to go back to that moment in time and bring it back to the present, the current time, to resolve that. So that's kind of what happens when I'm talking about fragmenting. So now I'll move on to the types of souls, and also a little bit about empaths. So let's start off with dark soul. So I define a dark soul as a energy of a person that contracts. So, there's like the expansion and there's a contraction. So when it's contracting, it's sort of taking in energy from the outside instead of generating its energy from the inside, which is what the soul typically does to create its own energy. But it's not creating its own energy because it's taking in energy from the outside. So that's sort of like a dark kind of, almost like a black magic kind of thing to do. Of course, we don't really think of it that way. We just think of it as someone being really draining. But taking energy from the inside out means you have to get it from someone else's soul, which is draining, obviously, So the darker soul is going to be dense. It's going to be obsessed with knowledge and understanding and power. So power, what does that mean? It can kind of mean like a soul. Let's say, it doesn't want someone else to be able to overpower it. So it just does whatever it takes so that no one can overpower it, but in the process sort of loses itself in that quest for being indomitable kind of thing, or not like giving in to any emotions. It just sort of pushes them away, and it's like, you can't hurt me because there's just like no emotions really there. It can be a few different things. So not all dark souls are evil, but in this reality they kind of tend to be, just because that's the easiest way to get energy. So the two kinds of dark souls, if that even makes sense, I'm going to talk about are the difference between a narcissist and a psychopath or a sociopath. I don't really differentiate between the socio and psychopath, but I do differentiate between a narcissist and a psychopath or a sociopath. So to me, a narcissist, the difference between them is a narcissist is like a harvester. So it grows the crops, it tends to them, it waters them, it gives them sun, etc., and then it just harvests them, and it takes whatever energy grew, it takes the crop and it eats it. So it's fixating on a specific person or group of people in order to build the trust, fertilize, grow the seeds, and then harvest that energy through either abuse or fear or control, so that kind of thing where it's investing in their trust and then it just harvests that energy from those souls. So the difference with a psychopath or sociopath would sort of be more like a hunter or a gatherer. So as far as the gatherer goes, it's not directing the energy at a specific person or situation or group of people, but it is just going around, and whenever it happens to stumble upon some kind of energy, such as the energy generated from like a funeral or a sports game or like that collective release of energy, it'll go there and just sort of suck it in. So it's always sucking in. And then as far as the hunter, this would obviously be sort of the worst side of it, where they're hunting, people to torture, and then by torturing that person, they are taking that energy. But the difference between that and the harvester, which is the narcissist, is that the hunter is not gaining trust. It's not growing. It's not, nurturing in its own creepy way. It's just capturing and then taking. So that's kind of how I see the difference between them. And then lastly, we'll talk about light souls and empaths. So they're not necessarily the same thing. So a lighter soul, like the dark soul, contracts, the light soul expands. It's not obsessed with knowledge and power. It's not really obsessed at all. It's more so wanting to grow towards a greater sense of peace or well-being. The main sort of emotion or sensation associated with a lighter soul would be faith, and then love, of course. But love is kind of one of those terms that's confusing to people, because it kind of means something different to everyone. But so I would say faith in abundance, but also sort of in that the universe is a light place, and that everything is working for us and moving us forward, and we're always healing. That's kind of how a lighter soul sees things. They're not obsessed with power, because to them the greatest power is their peace of mind and their ability to manifest. That's sort of how it's different than the darker soul. So then an empath would sort of be someone who is more tuned into these energies that other people are emitting. So they pick up on the good energy, the bad energy, sort of like the energy grid. So for example, if an empath went to like the same funeral or sports game, they're still going to feel that energy the same way like a darker soul, like a narcissist or a psychopath would, but they're not going to take it in. It's going to overwhelm their system because they're not utilizing that energy for themselves. So that's kind of why a lot of people think that narcissists and empaths are like a similar or like opposite ends of a spectrum, but it's really more just that the narcissist is also sensitive to energy, but it's harvesting it, it's taking it in and then using it. The empath is also picking up on that energy, but it's not utilizing it because it doesn't take that in to use it. It takes it in to become aware of it. But ultimately it's using its own energy generated by its own soul to move through the world. So it's kind of a longer video. Those are all the terms I have for you today. If you have any other questions about other things I've said that don't make sense, or just anything at all, any comments, please feel free to leave them below, and I will see you soon. All right, happy holidays, everyone, and until next time, bye.